Exercises involving a nuclear element on the border with the European Union. Russia and Belarus, without hiding it, are practicing an offensive on the Suwalki Corridor, the shortest route to Kaliningrad through the lands of Poland and Lithuania. Meanwhile, a representative of the American president is flirting with Lukashenko in Minsk. Sanctions were lifted from the airline Belavia in exchange for the release and expulsion from the country of 52 political prisoners. However, some of them absolutely did not want to leave their homeland, and one of them did not leave at all. What did Trump write to Lukashenko, and how are Europeans reacting to his latest statements about Russian attacks? TSN's international correspondent Yana Slesarchuk will explain in detail.
On the night before Friday, barbed wire appeared at the checkpoints between Poland and Belarus. The border is completely closed for both entry and exit. A 3-kilometer zone along the border is off limits for flights, both in Poland and in neighboring Lithuania. This is how European states responded to the large-scale Russian-Belarusian military exercises with the telling name Zapad 2025. About 18,000 soldiers are taking part in them, including 5,500 Russians. They also plan to test the new missile system Oreshnik. Mamad.
These maneuvers are specifically directed against Poland and the European Union. This is essentially an aggressive military scenario against our country.
The goal of the Russian-Belarusian exercises is no secret to anyone in Poland. This concerns a sparsely populated area on the border between Poland and Lithuania, the capture of which would give Russia a direct route to its Kaliningrad region.
One of the main targets of these exercises is the well-known Suwalki Corridor. It is precisely this area that the simulated operations are aimed at least for now, they are simulated operations.
Meanwhile, the President of the United States, who continues to be questioned about what he thinks regarding the 24 Russian drones deliberately directed at NATO territory, responds, "They simply made a mistake."
I heard about what happened. As you know, they were being shot down and they got a little out of control. But regardless, I condemn even the fact that they were close to that border. I don't like it. I'm not happy about it. I'm not happy about any of this.
This was not a mistake, writes Polish Foreign Minister Radosław Sikorski from the train taking him to Kiev. The day before, he noted that the drone incursion into Poland lasted 7 hours. 19 border violations were recorded. Drone debris fell more than 400 kilometers deep into Polish territory, so it's hard to call this a coincidence. But the day before, while the Poles were preparing to close the borders with Belarus, Minsk was hosting a special representative from the United States. And John Cole announced on camera that the American sanctions against the Belarusian airline Belavia had been lifted.
The conversation between our president from Air Force One and your president was very productive. All our talks with each other have been very productive. Now we are lifting the sanctions from Belavia. Right now, okay?
At that very moment, 52 political prisoners who had been held in Belarusian prisons were crossing the Lithuanian border. Among them were 16 foreign citizens. Lithuanian President Gitanas Nausėda was the first to thank Trump for the release of his 6 fellow citizens.
I want to note that the American efforts were indeed very effective and successful. In the end,
However, not all of the released Belarusians who are being welcomed at the American embassy in Lithuania agree with this, since they have now been deported from their own country. Journalist Larisa Shkiryakova, through tears, calls what happened to her a double punishment. First prison, now exile from my homeland.
I had 4 months left until my release. Forgive me if I say something wrong, but I would have liked to serve my sentence and stay at home.
And 69-year-old Nikolai Statkevich, in protest against the illegal deportation, simply refused to cross the Lithuanian border and spent several hours in the area between the two borders. Then the security forces took him back to Belarus. The fate of the opposition figure is currently unknown. The Belarusian dictator is quite skilled at trafficking people. Even before the start of Russia's full-scale war, he was terrorizing Poland and Lithuania with migrants whom he deliberately brought in from troubled countries in the Middle East and Africa for that very purpose. And once in Belarus, with the help of the security forces, he effectively created a corridor for them from Minsk, where planes would arrive, to the forest, to the European border, and would not let them leave from there. This pressure from the security forces behind them, combined with the unusual frosts, forced the destitute people to literally storm the border, while the Poles and Lithuanians on their side did everything possible to reinforce it. Now the Belarusian dictator has a new stage. For his compliance and the release of political prisoners, Trump is sending him cufflinks as a gift and wishing him a happy birthday.
Dear esteemed Mr. Lukashenko, my beloved wife Melania joins me wholeheartedly in sending her very best wishes to you and your family.
Belarus's permanent representative to the UN, Rybakov, who is translating the American letter for Lukashenko, is so nervous that his hands are shaking. For Lukashenko, who has been marginalized in recent years, these gestures of attention are much more beneficial than they are for Trump, who is making them. This potentially legitimizes Lukashenko on the world stage, just as much as Alaska does for Putin. But American sanctions are nowhere near as damaging to Minsk as European ones. That's why now Lukashenko has to hope that by releasing even more prisoners, he will eventually see Trump put pressure on European partners. He still has people to bargain with. There are still more than 1,000 people in prison for political reasons. Yana Slesarchuk, TSN 1+1, Marathon United News.
At present, there is no evidence of a military strike group being formed on the border with Belarus that would threaten Ukraine. And the number of Russian troops who have arrived for joint exercises this time is significantly smaller. This was reported to TSN by Andriy Demchenko, spokesperson for the State Border Guard Service. According to him, border guards, together with intelligence services, are actively monitoring everything happening in the neighboring country during the joint exercises with Russia. Their active phase began today and will continue until the 16th of September. According to preliminary information, at this moment, Russia has not deployed a large number of forces and equipment. For example, in 2022, during similar exercises, the number of enemy personnel on the territory of Belarus reached up to 12,000. However, in a comment to TSN, Andriy Demchenko emphasized that various provocations or methods of informational influence by the enemy cannot be ruled out, since this direction has been threatening for Ukraine since the beginning of the full-scale invasion, when Belarus allowed the occupying troops to cross its border.
As of now, fortunately, there is no activity observed in the direction of our border, whether from various units of the Belarusian army or units of the Russian army. We cannot rule out either provocations or even informational influence aimed at escalating the situation in the hope that Ukraine will respond by further strengthening this direction, thereby weakening areas that are more important to us where active combat is taking place.
And a few hours ago, Donald Trump made another statement regarding the incidents when Russian drones crossed NATO borders. My patience with Putin is running out very quickly. The US president stated this earlier on the Fox and Friends program. Let us recall that he previously called the appearance of drones on Polish territory a likely mistake. He claimed that the drones went out of control when they were being shot down. Now, however, Trump has agreed that more pressure should be put on Russia, according to Politico, citing sources. But the US and the EU, it is said, differ in their methods. Presidents, prime ministers, ministers, Trump's special envoy, and even a prince. This is an international diplomatic landing party which these days at least allows Kiev residents to sleep at night. President Zelensky even stated that the presence of Trump's special envoy in Ukraine would encourage Russia to cease fire, and that he could even grant General Kellogg citizenship. Throughout this TCH broadcast, we will talk about a day of statements, important meetings and promises about support for achieving a just peace and Ukraine's future prosperity. But first to the news from the frontline regions where, unfortunately, enemy shelling does not cease for even a single day.